Hi, welcome back to part 6 of the Avocados in Color pencil. This is a texture study, so we are going over how to create texture with color pencil. If you haven't seen the previous episodes of this project, you can head over to my YouTube channel and you can see the previous 5 episodes from the last few weeks of working on this project. If you want to try this project yourself, you can download the free reference photo and line drawing from my website over at jhillfineart.com and follow the tab that says tutorials, and all the information will be on there. The downloads will be there, and you can also see what materials I'm using with this project. So anyways, let's go ahead and continue where we left off. So last week we were going over the top portion of the avocado half, and we were creating all those little lumps and bumps and the texture of this, and sort of really pinpointing how to visually see it and recreate it. So I did promise, as promised, I did do my homework. I worked on this a little bit. Most of last week we worked on the top portion of this, and we kind of started setting the values, getting the colors right as we're kind of working around. So if you remember from last time too, we want to pay attention to the direction of a lot of these bumps. If you kind of look at your reference photo and sort of try to see patterns in texture, it makes it a lot easier and simple to break down. So I'm kind of seeing, areas where it looks like it's circular. Like if you notice right here in the highlight, it almost kind of looks like a rosette sort of pattern, and we zoom out so you can see that. So right here it looks like a rosette pattern, and then you can also see on the reference photo, which is right above 2, you can see that above me. If you look close, a lot of these bumps, as it goes around the form, because it's a rounded object, those bumps will sort of flatten out as it goes around the sides of the object because they're getting further away. So as it gets to the top, where we can see it in the most, like right in front of our viewpoint, they become more circular, a little bit more round. And then we also you can kind of see areas of movement. So if you kind of think about a group of fish swimming in water, and like maybe they're just going in a circle or they're going in different patterns, you can see, linear shapes, either roundish oval shapes that are similar to these little bumps, and they're kind of going in a little direction. So as you study your reference photo, you can start to see areas where a grouping of this texture will go in a specific direction. And so that will help you to recreate that texture more accurately as well. So I've already got a good portion of this done. There are some areas that need to continue to be worked on. The application is still a little bit thin as far as the color pencil. I'm working on pastel matte, so it takes a lot of layers to fill that tooth up. And you can also create a lot of depth by adding a lot of layers as well. So I'm still working up the values with this top half, and I'm still working up areas to get the color in the right degree of warm and cool that it needs to be. So I'm just going to kind of pick a point, and we'll just continue to work on that. If you have questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer them best I can. And let me make sure that my stream is good. Sometimes it's not. So, okay. So I'm going to go in. One of the things that jumped out to me that really that I need to go in and fix or really start rendering is sort of this area right here. I started by just adding some small little circles and then adding the white pencil on top of it to kind of bring out some of that reflective light. I noticed that these are not quite white, but this pencil being so opaque will help me to bring out the opacity, and I can layer on some lighter greens, and that will help to show up a lot better. So we'll just kind of work on this section. So as just a brief recap of what I've done is to create texture, you really need to have a good foundation to sort of build the shapes onto. And everyone is going to have a different method. This is just one that I found that works for me. And there's no right and wrong to do this, but because this paper is so textured, I'm able to take lighter colors and draw over top of darker colors, so I can work from dark to light or light to dark, back and forth. But an easy way to break down sort of a recipe is to get in your gradients first. So imagine away all the texture, imagine away those little tiny details, and just kind of look at where it goes from dark to medium to light in sort of a smooth transition. And if you can get that down without any texture, just smooth gradients, you can then go back in and start adding some of those bumpy textures on top of that, and those two layers will work really well together. That isn't always the way you should do that, depending on the paper you're using. With this particular paper, it's a really good way to achieve a very simple way to, get in your texture. But if you're using something that is not as textured, you really need to be strategic about where you're putting your lights and your darks. So you may have to draw in your texture and gradients with your values on like the first layer, because you may not be able to layer light over dark. But I always recommend this paper because it's just really easy to use, and it kind of takes a lot of the brain work out of it, because I don't really like to think too much when I'm doing my art. I just like to kind of get in the mood, get in the groove, and just go with it. So you can see now that even in this sort of darker area, I'm still able to bring out some of these highlights. And I'm looking at my reference photo, and I'm looking for little areas where it's just little spots of light. Now, in this area, there's going to be some more yellow tones. So I'm going to go over this over the white marks that I just did. I'm going to put in a little bit of this yellow, because that is going to be the color of the reflected light from the avocado below. And then I'm going to add a little bit more greens. There's some darker greens in there as well. But always remember to follow your reference photo. If you're going for realism, or you're interested in studying light and studying color and shape and form, or in this case, we're studying texture, it's always a good idea to just really study what you're doing. It helps a lot. And I'm just going in with, this is the Chrome Oxide Green from Polychromos. I've pretty much used a lot of the Polychromos pencils in this drawing just because I like the color choice. You can use whatever brand of pencils you have. There's no right or wrong. But let's take a little minute and talk about pencil quality. So not all pencils were created equal, in my opinion. There are so many pencil sets out there that you can purchase, and you probably have no idea which one to buy, because there are so many of them that come with like 200 colors or something like that. And that's a really good deal, especially if you're getting them for like, $50 or whatever they're charging these days. But you do have, if you're a beginning artist and you're just playing, you just want to play with the color pencils, maybe color in some coloring books or just doodle, you really don't have to invest in an expensive set of color pencils. But as you continue to use them, you'll probably grow out of them if you're interested in doing this sort of thing long term. Now, for my students that I currently teach, if they want to learn color pencils and how to draw with them the way that I do, I do recommend investing in an expensive, better quality set. And the difference between like a budget option and a more artist grade color pencil set is the quality. And it's the quality of the pigment, it's the quality of how they feel in your hand as you're coloring, it's the quality of how they blend. Now, you can make amazing artwork with budget color pencils. You absolutely can. But once you've experienced it enough, you'll notice some differences. So for many, many years, still will say starting from high school, I learned how to use color pencils. I mean, like when I was little, I started with Crayola. And then when I got to high school and in my high school art class, we used Prismacolor. And I liked it. They were like so much better than the Crayola ones. Oh my gosh, so buttery, so smooth. And it was way better. So I used that brand for a long time. And once this would probably be like decades down the road, and I started studying how to get better at doing color pencil. I started following other artists and seeing what they were doing for color pencil, and because I knew where I wanted to go. I knew that I wanted to get into realism, and I knew that my skill wasn't there, and I felt like the pencils were limiting me because I couldn't get them to do what I wanted to do. And a lot of that was like blending and just getting the depth that I wanted. So like I never knew about blending color pencils with odorless mineral spirits until I saw Lisa Lockery do it. So she's got an awesome channel. If you haven't gone and checked her out, go check out her channel. She's an amazing artist, and I learned a lot from her. And she really introduced me to a lot of the more artist grade pencil sets. And so Lisa, if you ever watch this, thank you. But anyways, I decided to try it. So I tried using my Prismacolor with blending with the odorless mineral spirits, and it was just like, it was like magic, it was so just eye-opening. And I was able to blend my pencils the way that I was imagining that I wanted to do them, and it was just like, it was night and day. So I did that for a while, and then I wanted a better quality because Prismacolors are not all the way, most of them are not light fast. And I was starting to sell work and take commissions, and I really wanted my artwork to last. So I wanted the pigment in my color pencils to last a long time. So getting a higher quality color pencil that the pigment would last, they say if it's, excellent light fast or highest grade light fast according to the Blue Wool, the Blue Wool light fast testing, or American something standard. I don't know. They got some fancy names. So there's like two tests. And well, anyways, they're rated to last up to 100 years without fading under museum quality conditions, is what a light fast description, I guess, for lack of better words, would be. Now, honestly, my stuff is not going to be hanging up in a museum, but so maybe it won't last 100 years. Maybe it'll last 75. I don't know. I probably won't live long enough to find out. But anyways, So I wanted a better quality for my customers. I wanted a better quality because also my Prismacolor, anytime you dropped them, they would break, they would shatter. And I noticed when I would use them in comparison with, I think the Polychromos was the first set that I bought, that I didn't realize how much filler was in the Prismacolors. Yes, they are cheap. You get a lot of wonderful colors for your, for your money, but it's, I don't know, there's just something about the quality of those pencils that they started working against me. So I guess I kind of outgrew them, I guess you could say. But they just, I don't know, they just weren't as, I don't know, like the pigment level wasn't there. It was just like, they just felt a little hollow. They felt a little cheap looking. And so, it was time for me to move on from them. Now, they are still a great option if you're a beginner and you want to work with color pencils long term. You don't have to buy the most expensive brand of color pencil. You can still use those. They just weren't a great fit for me. I will recommend them to students that don't want to spend the money on better sets, but usually in my experience, some of my students have started with Prismacolor and they always 6 months to a year later, they end up buying the more expensive ones because they outgrow them. And they want better colors. They want colors that are more quality, I guess. They have a better pigment load. They just feel better. So that's sort of my take on that. So anyways, I was going somewhere with this. We were just talking about color pencil brands. But yeah, so you really have to do your research. Most of the color pencil brands out there are probably not going to be light fast. They will say so on their website if they are. And they will usually give like a graph of, the Blue Indigo has a rating of 2 or 1 or 3 or whatever it is. And they will say which testing is on there. Now, one thing I noticed too when I'm buying cheap paint from like Michaels or something, or something that I know is just real cheap and they probably didn't spend a lot of money on it. And light fastness testing goes for anything that has pigment, whether it's paint, whether it's watercolor, pastels, anything. But a lot of the packaging on it will say conforms to ASTM, which is the American Standard something. It's one of the light fast tests, but it says conforms to it, not is. And I suspect that they're not light fast. I think it's just sort of, they're like, oh, it's a high quality, just words. It's just words. They didn't actually do any testing. But I mean, maybe they have, but always research the product that you want to buy. So anyways, after I bought Prismacolor as my first set, I think I bought their set of 130, I think was the set that I have or had. And I used that for a long time. And once I got my artist grade set, I had bought the Polychromos ones. Those were my first ones. And it was just such a wonderful experience, so much better of a pencil. And then after that, I wanted, these ones are, so there's 2 types of color pencil. There are oil-based color pencils and there are wax-based color pencils. And then, well, actually it is technically 3 because the Derwent Light Fast set's sort of a hybrid between the 2, but it's either going to be an oil-based or a wax-based pencil. So what does that mean? It's the binder that holds the pigment together is what they're talking about. And so the Polychromos, to my understanding, is a oil-based color pencil. And the oil-based color pencils, or at least these ones in particular, have a much firmer point. They stay sharper longer. And they also feel like when I color with them, they have a thinner application So I feel like I can get more layers with these, where the wax base ones will sort of deposit color pencil more heavily and it'll fill up the tooth a little bit quicker. Do I prefer one over the other? Not really. There are some, I don't consciously reach for one over the other except for like certain situations. But with the polychromos, the oil-based ones, I like them for small little tiny details because I can sharpen this really, really sharp, and I can make this, I can just get really small details. And I can, like if I'm drawing a nice thin crispy line, I will use those. Now with the wax-based ones, the wax-based are going to be just like your Crayola or your Prismacolor. They're going to have that buttery, smooth feeling. And that set that I bought was the Caran d'Ache Luminance set. And I really like that set too because they just have so many like unique colors. And they just feel so smooth to work with. They blend well. They both blend well, both products. And you can use them interchangeably, so they work well together. And I fell in love with those too because, well, if there's an art product that I haven't tried and it's high quality and I think I can use it, I'm probably going to buy it because I'm a art supply kind of connoisseur or junkie, whatever you want to say. But anyways, so that's the wax-based versus the oil-based. Now, sometimes I will reach for the polychromos when I'm doing my gradient layers because they do feel a little bit thinner than using a wax-based pencil, especially if I'm trying to conserve an area where I know I want to build up a lot of layers with a lot of different colors or textures. So I want to preserve the amount of tooth of the paper that I can so that I can get more layers. And so sometimes I will consciously use the polychromos when I want more layers. But if I have a larger section that is pretty minimal in color and I just want to get a nice application of pencil down, I'll reach for a wax base. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I completely choose depending on the color that I'm looking for, not necessarily the feel of the pencil. Now the Derwent Light Fast pencils is sort of a hybrid. They say on their website, I think it's an oil and a wax-based blend. And I don't use those as often, but lately I've been reaching for those a lot because they just have some really unique colors in that set as well. But yeah, I would suggest if you're a beginner or even like if you're just wanting to up your color pencil game, and you can buy all these pencils open stock. So you can buy just a couple just to see if you like them before you invest in a whole set, because they make small sets that you can just purchase. I would suggest get a couple pencils in some colors that you use the most and get some from a couple different brands and just try them out. See if you like them. That would be my suggestion. But if I had to choose just one to keep forever, but I'd probably go with my Luminance just because of the color palette, because there's a lot of unique colors in their color line that I can't find in other sets. So yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if I could choose just one. So anyways, back to what I'm doing here. If you can see closely, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I don't have my printout. I'm gonna put my tablet here so you can kind of see. So all these little white peaks here, because they look like miniature mountains, you know, because that's where the light's catching the peaks of the top of the bumps of the avocado. I'm putting white there, and then I'm also looking around it. They almost seem like there's a white spot, and then around it there's a ring where the sides of that particular form is, because these are just little humps. So they're three-dimensional objects. So you have, if you have a three-dimensional object, you have three values. You have a highlight, a midtone, and a dark. And so I'm looking for those. I'm looking for the highlight, which is my little white dot, and then I'm looking to see where the dark shadow is and where the midtone is. It's very, very tiny. So yes, you do need to sort of zoom in with your eyeballs. And I'm trying to just mimic that. So here are my high points, my little white dots. And I realize that not all of these are white. I will tone them down. But I need that white pencil behind it so I can get some of these more translucent colors to show up. So what I'm doing is, where I see, like, where should I put those white dots, I'm looking at a grouping. So this would be one grouping of white dots, or, you know, the highlights. And I'm kind of trying to mimic it the best way that I see it as from the reference photo. So I'm looking for areas like where I've done my sort of gradient layer. You can see like this area right here where it's lighter green, and then around it is where I have a lot of the dark. So maybe I'll put a little white dot there. And this is really kind of educated guessing. But you do have to sort of slow down and pay attention to what you're doing to make sure that you get it right. And the further away that highlight, or that area where the light is hitting, the further away as it goes around, as it curves down into this crevice here, you know, we see like maybe a little dot here, a little dot there, and it sort of just dissipates into nothing. So pay attention to those details, because that's really what's going to help put those values in the right spot, and that's what's going to make your artwork look more realistic. So I'm just going to find areas where I see those high points, and I'm just going to kind of color in little spots. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just suggest it. Power of suggestion. So I think that's enough white spots. So now I'm going to focus on maybe the dark side. So this one is that pine green. It's a bluish green. And because the light is coming from like this direction, so it's coming from that up that way, the shadow is on the underside, on that side. And you can get all this information from the reference photo, you just gotta look for it. So I'm just gonna go in very carefully and just put little tiny shadows around everything. This is the part that takes color pencil a very long time to do. That's why it's so tedious. Any realism, you know, if you're into realism, this is the tedious part, is just getting those tiny little details and just trying to get them in there best you can. But this is the fun part. Or at least I think it's the fun part. It does make you go cross-eyed after a while. But there's also these little kind of valleys, you know, in between these little lumps too. So texture does not have to be scary. It just takes patience and a good sense of values, of lights and darks. Where are your lights? Where are your darks? And I have not blended any of this yet with the mineral spirits. I probably will, and I won't be using a lot of mineral spirits because I don't need to, but I do want to get rid of a lot of this grainy look to it. And then try to look for areas of, like if you see other patterns or areas where it just sort of jumps out at you for some particular reason. Like, you know, I keep seeing this dark shadow that just happens to live here on my reference, and it just sticks out to me a little bit more than anything else. So I'm just going to add that in there. Now we don't have to do every single little bump, but just enough to be convincing. Now this area right here, I think needs to be a lot darker. I'm gonna go with the blue indigo or the dark indigo. I've already got, I think it's sepia and black and maybe even some indigo in this section already. Here, I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. I really want a nice kind of crisp line, and I may even darken this part up too. It's a lot easier to kind of go back and forth between sections to, you know, enhance your values or just to adjust them. I'm constantly going back and forth between my values or different sections to adjust my color or values. But sometimes once you get a large section done and you're not sure where to go with it next, it's easier just to leave it alone for a while and go back to it. Sometimes you just need other pieces of the puzzle to be able to see those previous sections a little bit better. All right, I'm gonna go on top of those white bumps. This one is, this is a Caran d'Ache. I can't pronounce the name of this one, but it's number 713. And I'm going to color the tops of these white bumps that I put in with this color. Because it's not quite white, but it's not quite green. This one's sort of like a celery green color almost. Yeah, like this is one of the colors that I would never be able to get in like the Polychromos line. Or at least not this precise color. I feel like the Polychromos line of pencils is more primary or standard colors, where the luminance from Caran d'Ache is a little bit more unique. Oh, and I forgot to mention the Derwent drawing pencils, these ones. This is also a wax-based set, and it's even more buttery than the luminance. And there's only 20 pencils, which is super sad, but it's like a landscape set, and it's just, they have the best colors and the best feel of pencil. I wish they would make a larger set, and I probably mentioned that already in one of my previous videos. So anyways, I also posted yesterday that if you're local to Southeast Georgia, my friend Janet and I are going to be doing a sip and paint, or we'll say a wine and art paint party at Watermelon Creek Winery in Glenville, Georgia. And if you can make it, register. I've got the information posted on my website now with links, so you can go ahead and buy tickets, or you can call for more information. And we are going to be doing a pumpkin, 2 pumpkins, that is more of a Starry Night inspired painting. And we're going to be using metallic paints, and it's just going to be fun and whimsical. And I hope you can join us. It'll be a lot of fun. So we do one of these events every 3 to 4 months or so, and it's just a great time. We have a good time. Okay, so I'm up in this area. There's some more sort of grayish green tones, so I'm going to break out this earth green. And there's almost like some little swirls almost. I'll show you so you can see it a little bit better. There's like right in here, there's like more of these like smudges where the light is reflecting on, like in the valley portion of the texture. So I'm gonna try and mimic that. So I'm just kind of using a linear drawing stroke, and I'm kind of moving it in some, like a curved line almost. And it stops about right here. And it's also a little bit bluish on my end, bluish greenish. Let's see if I can find a nice pencil for that. Let's try the light cobalt turquoise. Oh, that's kind of interesting. That's one thing I need to be better about. Speaking of doing things that are a little bit more interesting, is I really want to get in touch with my more creative side. I've spent a lot of years working from references, and I really want to test myself to work from imagination, or more so from my imagination. And honestly, I'm too scared to do it. Because like if I can't see it, I like, my brain just can't function. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't see what I'm trying to draw. But I need to. I've done pieces out of my head, and they've all turned out really cool. I don't know why I can't seem to want to branch out and just free myself. I'm so controlling. Okay, so let's focus on some of these mid-tone greens. This one is number 182, Cobalt Green from Caran d'Ache. And I'm just gonna kind of get in some areas that look a little thin. My application is a little sloppy, so I don't know if you can see. Let me find a piece right here. So when I'm adding in texture, or just where I just need like a squiggle, like I'm just kind of doing one of these. Like that's sort of the pattern that I'm working with when I'm just adding texture, or at least for this particular section. Where if you wanted a nice solid application, you would use small little circles that are very compact and even. But if I want to add more texture, I tend to use like squiggles or, little back and forth motion, something like that to create different patterns. So it's kind of hard to see because the green is they're all starting to kind of mesh together, which is what we want. We want a nice melting pot of different colors and different patterns to start to create, this sort of, it almost kind of looks like reptile skin at this point, but I need some water. Which I guess you could use the same technique for reptile skin, although I think that would be a lot more structured because they have a very specific pattern to their skin, I think. I've never actually tried to draw or color a reptile before. Maybe I should try that next. Okay, where are we at here? So I'm just kind of checking areas where I've been and just kind of seeing where I want to go next. Let me brighten this up a little bit. Hopefully you can see that a little better. Okay. Let's see. Oh, hi, Rain of Night. I'm sorry if you've been here and commented a few minutes ago. Sometimes I don't always look at the comments, but thanks for coming, and thanks for the compliment. Appreciate it. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or whatever. Hope you're having a great day. Okay, so down here, my values aren't quite strong enough. The reflected light from the plate, let me move this so you guys can see it, is a little bit brighter than what I have currently, and you can see my little C-shape markings in the dark. They're not quite elongated enough for this section right here. If you look at the reference photo more closely, the humps sort of blend together. So I'm going to work on that some more. So I'm going to switch to the pine green. Do I want that one or do I want deep cobalt green? I need a piece of paper. I don't know where my scrap paper went, but I'm going to see which one is a little bit more cooler toned, and that is the deep cobalt. It's a little bit more blue, so I'm going to go with that. And I know I've talked about color theory and the importance of knowing colors. That definitely helps with creating realism as well, and taking your color pencils to the next step, or any medium to the next step. But knowing when to use different hues of color, like we've been using a lot of greens, but some greens are a little bit more yellow leaning, some of them are more blue leaning, some are more brown leaning, I guess, but that definitely helps to know when to use it. So in this corner, I can see that it's more blue tone just by looking at it, and that also comes from experience too, getting to know your utensils and knowing what they look like and sort of building that memory bank. And then also, for example, how do I know when to use a cooler tone or a warmer tone color for my project? So cooler tone pigments or colors, hues, whatever you want to call it, they will make things sort of go into pushing into the background. So if you have a landscape painting and your trees in the far distance have more of a blue hue to them, it tells you that they're further away in the distance. And for trees, they're more blue tone depending on time of day, and also because of the atmosphere, is blue. not, I guess that's not always true, but you know, for just a basic idea, you know, using a cooler tones always seem to kind of go in the background. Now, warm tones, when you're getting to yellows and to reds, the human eye will pick up warmer tones first because red is the strongest color. I'm talking about warm tones and I just pick up an orange and I don't even need it. Subliminal messaging. But anyways, knowing, you know, if you want something to kind of jump out, be more vibrant, you know, you want more warm tones. Even though we're working in the green family, having more warmer tones where the areas around the highlight, they're going to be more like lime green. So the colors that usually are right in direct alignment with the light source can be a little washed out. So they may appear, you know, more whiter or more kind of, like in this case, I would say it's like a mint green color in comparison with like white paper. So we think that it's white because it's the highlight, but in this case it's not. But yeah, even the light source will change color. Like if it's the sun, your highlights might have more yellow tints to them. But if it's, you know, an overcast day, or you have a spotlight that has like a cooler light bulb where like it's almost like a blue tint, you know, your colors might have a more blue leaning palette to them. And so you just have to study and practice and know your pencils or your pigments. So anytime any of my students get new products, I try to encourage them to do a color swatch. So take out a piece of paper and make a color swatch sheet of every color that you have. So, for example, here's one that I did for the Inktense blocks. If you're not familiar with that product, it is almost kind of like a block of pigment, and when it dries, it's permanent and it can't be reactivated with water. It's part of the Inktense block. You know, that's the product. That's the cool thing about the product and they're so vibrant. And anyway, so I swatched everything out. So now I know what each of these colors look like, because a lot of times your colors will look completely different than how they appear when you're not, you know, just in the casing. So very, very important to do that. And then you also build your memory to, you know, what colors you might need. And that just comes with experience. So I'm using a light gray. So when things are kind of moving away from you, so this side is getting cooler, but the color is also less intense. And I think the white reflection, the reflective light, is never really as intense as the areas where it's in direct light. So typically I will kind of go with grays and less intense colors or cooler colors depending on what I'm drawing, because there are some warmer shadows depending on what you're coloring or painting. And sometimes I don't always get it right, you know? Very rarely, I think, do I actually get it on point. But, you know, you go for close. It doesn't have to be perfect. So right here where it's going away from the reflected light, there's some midtone before it goes into this dark shadow here. The green here is more intense. I'm going to zoom in. And so the green here is a little bit more intense between these two sections. So I'm going to just add in some bright green, but it's also a little yellow, just it's more of a yellow leaning green. Now I could find like this is a pretty yellow leaning green in itself, but it's not enough. So I'll just simply add some yellow in. And the reason that particular spot is a little bit more yellow is because there's a reflection, a color sharing relationship between what it's sitting next to. And that also will help with creating realistic textures too, or rather realism, is making sure that your values are right, your colors are right, but paying attention to, some of those color sharing relationships, like, if you have a red ball sitting next to a blue ball, the light will kind of pass between the two, and you might get some little bit of red reflection on the blue ball and some blue reflection onto the red ball, and both of them are going to have more of like a purple sort of consistency. Now, one might be more red leaning, one might be more blue leaning as far as the ratio, but looking for little areas like that is very important. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna go back to my medium green here. I'm just gonna add some more variety. I should probably maybe blend some of this out. Although now that I've got a lot of mid-tone green in here and I've got some darks, I'm missing a little bit of highlights and even some deeper darks. So see these little holes right here? These little circles. I want some of these to be more highlighted. So I'm going back in with that opaque white. And some of them are not all dots. Some of them are just little, just look like little C shapes. But I'm it's starting to look a little flat because I'm losing the contrast. There's not enough darks in this section where there should be. So I'll have to go back in there and focus on the dark areas. So try to focus on one color at a time. It'll be a lot easier. Or rather one value, one color. Let's see, this one was, let's go with the deep cobalt, which I don't think is going to be dark enough. I'm going to mute myself real quick so I can sharpen this. Always helps to keep your pencils sharp. That way you can get into all these little nooks and crannies. So on this side, the little dark areas that I'm seeing in the reference photo that I don't have, they're kind of going in this direction, like kind of sweeping from like up top down to the right in this grouping, I should say. So I'm just gonna put more of a linear squiggle line or dots, but something that's going to flow in that direction, because that's what I see. I keep looking at the stream to make sure everything's like okay. I'm so paranoid that it's just gonna shut off or something. I really hope that other YouTubers have had the same mishaps, I guess you could say, as I have. I'm gonna have to delete some pictures eventually, or not pictures, videos eventually, just because they're so terrible. But that's okay. Gotta start somewhere. So I'm gonna actually do a light coating of this pine green because there's just too much of this lime green coming through, and it really just needs to be slightly darker. So I'm just gonna almost like giving it a glaze, if that makes sense. If you're a painter, sort of glazing, just a light coating. Now something is going on in here. There's some interesting little shapes happening, and they all have some little dark rings around them. So last week I also showed you a painting that I'm working on with some clouds, and I'll be honest, I have not touched it. I haven't looked at it. I need to though. I need to get better at, I'm not much of a landscape artist, so I'm kind of going out of my comfort zone with this one. And it's always good to go out of your comfort zone because you learn things and it helps you become a better artist by learning things that you don't know how to do. And so that is currently been my goal, is to try and learn some new things. Okay, there's also a lot of darks over here that I think I missed too. Oh, I just realized I'm out of the picture here. There we go. Sorry about that. So let's see. There are a lot of like little dark kind of pits over here. And I think this dark green is not quite dark enough. I'm going to move to the dark indigo. And maybe I'll add in some black. I like to make more natural color or dark shadows. So black on its own can be a little flat looking, but if you can jazz it up with some violets or some blues, sometimes even like reds, you know, depending on what you're doing. Like I could use like a dark red for some of these. If you like to color or shade with complementary colors. So a dark red would be a complementary of a really dark green. And back to that Caran d'Ache Luminance set, there are some really nice dark reds. And let's see if I can find it. This one is called Carmine Lake, I believe. Carmine Lake. And then they came out with a new one called Crimson something. Let's see. This one is Carmine. Oh, they're both Carmine Lake. Never mind. Okay, I have two of the same pencil. But it's a dark red, but it also has some dark browns in it too, almost like an oxblood color. And I think that would look nice for some of these dark shadows, because that'll also give some more saturation of color, some more richness to this as well. I've heard some artists say not to, I guess, use complementary colors when in your shadows or something like that. I don't know why. I always have, and I've liked how it looked. So I don't know if there's like a rule that I'm missing or something, and you're not supposed to. I have no idea. But I always liked how it looks when using complements in your shadows. I think it almost makes the shadows a little bit darker even, or sometimes. Now, one thing I did know or notice, when I'm doing, things like that, adding complements to your picture for shading purposes, no matter what value, I think the value needs to be the same. So like if your shadow is a value of 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being black, then your complementary color should also be 7 to get more of a even neutral, I guess, unless you intentionally want to make it darker or more one color leaning than the other. But one time I tried mixing skin tones with a pink and a lime green, both using very pale colors and the same value. It was a very light value, and it worked really well. Now, if I were to have used a dark color and a light color, I don't think that would have worked out the same. So I definitely think there's something to that. For the record, I never went to art school, so I'm probably a very uneducated artist when it comes to rules, but I've tried to do a lot of research on my own to learn how to do all this. If you've been to art school, what was your experience? Did you like it? Did you enjoy it? What did you get out of it? Do you think that you could have learned the same information if you didn't go to art school? Or maybe was there something, what was valuable about going that maybe would have been, that is worth going to art school versus not going to art school? Sometimes I thought about going back, but I kind of feel like I'm so set in my ways that I don't know if I could go back or could I. So I went to art school for 1 semester. Oh, hi, a view is a view. Message retracted. Oh, sorry. Looks very realistic. Thank you. Thank you for joining. So anyways, when I graduated high school, I wanted to be an art teacher. That was my dream of what I wanted to do for my career. And so I was going to go to college and get my art degree in fine arts. And I took 1 semester, and I think I took 2 classes. I took an art foundations class, which was the first class that you have to take before you can progress to other art classes. So it was a lot of, color theory and drawing theory and things like that, which super helpful. I think my 1 semester of art school, like, if that was the class to take, I'm glad I took that one, because I learned a lot from that. But I also had an amazing art teacher in high school that pretty much taught the class like a college course. So like I feel like I was very blessed in getting a really good art education without really having to go to art school. But I ended up getting married, and I dropped out of school because we moved, and I never went back, and I just kind of learned and did art on my own, and I never did become an art teacher like I had wanted to. So here, I'm going to pause for a second. So right here, let me move this over so you can see what I'm doing. As I'm looking at the reference photo, there is a shadow side. So you've got the highlight here, the mid-tone green, and then there is the shadow. But that shadow has some warmer tones, so I could either go with more of a more yellow leaning green, or I could add in, if I still wanted to stick with maybe using some more red tones to kind of create more of that complementary color. If I were to try and add this dark red, this Carmine Lake, it's way too dark. I gotta go with the value that's there, or at least a more appropriate value. This is way too dark. So I'm gonna go find in my stash something a little lighter, and let's see, this one is Indian Red. I think that's still a little too strong. So like, I do want something in the red family, but maybe not that strong. Let's try this cinnamon. This one is called Cinnamon. It's a little bit more pinky. So it's like that color. So it still has red tones in it, but it's not red like you would think it's red. And I'm going to pair that with my mid-tone green. So I'm mixing the two. And I like that right there. That looks good. So anyways, where was I? I was babbling on about art school. I don't know. I lost my train of thought. It'll come to me. So yeah, never did become an art teacher per se. But I always had something on the easel, always working with art, with a medium, with some sort of, project going, whether that was painting or drawing or just something, And I think that's really important, is to not lose that as an artist. Like if you don't have time for art, or if you don't have time to focus your goals as an artist or wanting to be full-time, like I went to work, I was working, and I didn't go back to school because for one, we were newlyweds, I couldn't afford it, and I just didn't go back to school. But I think as long as you just have something on your easel, just keep at it. I didn't start, I'm teaching now, but I've only been teaching art, locally with just private lessons for the past maybe 4 years or so. And, I've been doing artwork since I was little. I've been doing commissions and, things like that on the side, since, probably I was, in high school or just after high school. But, I've always wanted to be an art teacher. And I feel like now I finally get a chance to do that. But I don't think you need a degree to do that, I think because I kept up with my skills and I continued to teach myself how to do it and teach myself what I wanted, where I wanted to be, and just studied, I'm okay with being just a small time teacher, just doing it for, a small handful instead of like a huge classroom. So I guess I have a very biased view. I don't think you need to go to art school. I think there's a lot to learn by going to art school, but to be successful, do you have to go? Probably not. I think if you're a disciplined person and you can do your own work and your own studying on your own time, I don't see why you should have to go and get a degree and do the same exact thing that you could learn on your own. But like I said, I'm probably uneducated and and biased, of course, but that's okay. And gosh, there's so many like free classes that you can take advantage of, like locally. Like we have 3 art associations in our area, and they all give classes, So I think that in itself, like, is just so valuable. And you can support your local art associations and your local teachers, like me. So I'm working in the center area, and I'm just sort of highlighting or giving more contrast to the shapes of the area where it's in highlight. And there's some really crisp edges, and just pay attention to which side of these shapes the shadows are on. So because this is sort of the high point where the highlight is hitting the avocado, as it kind of goes out and curves, this is curving around this way is curving around that way, the shadows are sort of radiating out where it's on the outside edges, heading away from the highlight. And you just kind of make up little shapes, little squigglies. But I try to let the underdrawings, all these layers underneath, kind of do the hard work for me. So areas where it's dark already, like there's some dark right here, I'll just enhance that. And I'll just make it even more dark. And you just kind of make it up as you go. Okay, so I've got quite a bit on here. Let's go ahead and do some blending. I think I've been drawing on this thing for like an hour now without doing any sort of blending. It really doesn't need it, but I want to soften this texture that I just put in, and I also want some of the colors to kind of meld together, and I want to get rid of a lot of this grain texture. So I have my synthetic hog hair bristle brush. This is a number 4 filbert. The size of your brush should be something that is going to give you enough control. So I've got several different sizes. I've got some large ones that are some Taklon bristle brushes. These are going to be softer. They're not going to have as much pigment pushing power as the synthetic hog hair bristle brushes, but it's more of a preference. So whatever you are comfortable with using. But you do want to use a brush that's large enough for the given area that's going to give you the most control. So this is probably too small, and I'm kind of looking for my larger one that is a hog hair bristle brush, and I don't see it. So I'm just going to roll with this one. It'll just take me a little bit longer. But what I do want to do is, on our previous layers, on our first layers, when we did like just the gradient foundation without the texture, we could get pretty sloppy with the blending and the amount of mineral spirits, but we've got lots of layers on here already. I don't want to remove any layers with the solvent. because it's a solvent. It's going to remove layers. It's going to break down the binder and kind of turn the color pencil into a paint-like consistency. So depending on how much color pencil you have layered on, the degree of that paint-like consistency will change. So if areas where I only have a little bit of color pencil, it's going to be more of a grainy wash consistency versus a paste. So I also want to keep my texture where it lives, where I drew it. I don't want to smudge things and make it one muddy mess. So I want very little mineral spirits and I want very little smudging power. So I could use the Taklon bristle brush, but with these two that I have used recently, I noticed that it holds on to way too much of the mineral spirits. So I'm a little hesitant on using that one right now. So I'm just going to stick with the hog hair bristle brush. So I've got my little container of mineral spirits. This is Gamsol. So I'm just going to take just a quick dip, and I'm just going to blot it onto my towel. That's all I'm going to do. And so I'm going to very carefully press this down. I'm going to press it down, give it a little wiggle. Just enough pressure and wiggling until you see a difference, until it starts to soften. I don't want to scrub. I just want to soften and keep the detail where I put it. And you still want to be careful about if you have areas where it's dark, you don't want to move that into areas that you don't want that dark, because you are going to be picking up pigment onto your bristles as you move around. So you may have to clean off your brush as you go. And just take your time. Good artwork should take time. If you are rushing through your artwork, you probably won't be as happy as you could be if you took your time. And as you can see, it's starting to blur a little bit, which is what we want. We want it to blur, because then when it's dry, I can go back in and choose which areas I want to become more sharp and which areas I want to stay blurred and blended. This little brush is going to kill me. This is going to take forever. See if I can hurry up. And you'll be able to tell when it starts to dry out. And I'm going to be careful about going over these white spots. I know that I want to tint them because I don't want them to be white. So I think just having some residue of color on my bristle will be enough to just tint them slightly green. That one got a little lost, so maybe I had a little too much on my bristle. I'm going to go ahead and clean this off. Wipe it dry on the towel and just keep going. And also play around with the pressure of your blending too. Sometimes you do need a little bit more scrubbing power if you feel like it's just not budging. I don't think I have enough pigment built up on this particular section because it's still looking grainy to me and it's not blending as much, so I'm just going to scrub it a little more so I can get in between those nooks and crannies of the paper, and I'll just have to go back in and reapply all that color again. And yes, you you want to go through different phases of blending out and reapplying. Even though we just spent an hour redoing all of this, when I blend it, I'm going to go and probably take another hour, probably off camera, doing it again. But that's going to build up all those layers. It's going to build up your depth. That's what's going to create that richness and just really saturate the paper with pigment. So this just gives you a good idea of how long this medium can take. It is a very lengthy process, but it's very relaxing. I don't want to scare any of you off from trying it. You can be as detailed or not detailed as you want. I am a glutton for punishment, and I tend to go off the deep end with trying to capture detail. And I like the challenge. So just this area we've done so far, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see areas where it's still sort of grainy, or it feels a little bit thin, versus something like this where we've done a lot of layers, a lot more layers, and it looks very saturated and very full. So that just shows me that I need more layers of color pencil. I need to apply same colors, same pattern again. And that's just going to build up. So I don't like to see areas where it's thin like that. It just doesn't look finished to me. So I'm just going to keep working it until I like how it starts to build up. So what I could do is, if I know that about a particular section, I can just stop blending and not blend the rest of it, knowing that it's all going to be a little thin. And I can wait for that little section to dry and then just go back to reapplying. I don't have to blend it out if I think it needs more work. You can if you want to. You know, sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. Hopefully that stays in focus. I think it was going out of focus there a little bit. So this is where I put in some of that Scarlet Lake, that real deep red. I'm liking the buildup on this side. I do want to soften a little bit. And if I smudge a little bit, you know, that's okay. I can always go back and readjust my values. I still have a lot of tooth in this paper. You know, I can feel it, and I can, once you use grainy paper for a long time like this, you can kind of also hear it too. You know, you can tell the tonal difference of, you know, maybe not that much. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. All right, I'm going to zoom back out. So I've picked up a lot of dark on my bristle brush from going through that section. So I need to be careful where I put this down. There are some darker areas over here, so I'm okay with letting that excess dark pencil smudge over here because I need that darkness. So essentially I'm just kind of painting with it at this point. So I'll clean my brush out. Now we're going to get to this section here. I've got a clean brush and I'm just very gently going over this area where I've put highlights and lowlights. And I'm just softening this area. I am losing a lot of those highlights that I put in earlier. You can see where it's kind of darkened because I'm smudging, you know, I'm taking this color and I'm blending it, but I can go back and I can pull those values back out again because I still have tooth in the paper. And that white pencil is pretty awesome. You could, I guess, go in with a really tiny brush, which sometimes may be necessary. But I'm not too concerned about that right now. So one thing I do want to do before we end today's live stream is I want to fix this part right here where I filled up the tooth pretty quick and I didn't get the value that I wanted. So I'm going to use a product called, it's Titanium Touch-Up Texture. It is a white powder mixed with this liquid solution. Let's see if you can see it here. This color pencil touch-up texture. So the two of those products create a white paste that is archival. So it's not going to yellow over time, and it's also created specifically for color pencils. And what it is, it's a white paste that you can put directly on top of your drawing to bring out white in your drawing. So like if you have eyelash or something, if you have, you know, whiskers or white highlights that you just can't get true white again, you know, that putting that on definitely helps. The only thing I don't care about is it doesn't really dry like, you know, if you were taking the color pencil off and bringing it back to the bare paper, you can't really draw on it like that again. So I don't use it a lot because where you do put it, and you color over it, you still see like the outline of where you painted it. Like it won't flake off if you let it sit long enough. Like I'm gonna put it on and then I'll let it sit overnight so it completely dries before I color on top of it. But in a pinch, it'll work. And for something that small, like I wouldn't paint giant sections of something with it. But I'll show you here in just a minute. I'm gonna finish kind of blending this all in. So this all still feels really thin. It looks kind of thin as well. So I know that I need more applications of pencil. Now I am trying to kind of stay in the larger, darker areas. Trying to keep the shadows in the shadow areas, because I don't want to lose or completely lose all these highlights. Yeah, you can still see where it's quite grainy. See how thin that is still? You can still see the grain of the paper. So it's not done cooking yet. We need to layer some more. But sometimes it does help if you just blend it out anyway, just to kind of see what you're working with, get some of these colors to kind of blend in and create new colors and more depth. Okay, so now we're down in this area. And I'm just going to, blending a little too much. I don't want to lose some of this. So you kind of get like a lesson in painting at the same time when you do this particular method with the mineral spirits. So you get to color, you get to draw, and you get to paint. I think that's probably why I like it so much. Get the best of like all three worlds. Okay, so I'm happy with that for now. I'll let that dry and then we'll continue on with that next week. But it's looking good. You know, it's pretty close. It looks like an avocado. So let's go and I'll show you how to use this titanium touch-up texture. So I shook this up pretty good off camera because I knew I was going to use it, but there's this white stuff on the bottom. You want to kind of get as much as you can off of that, and it literally takes forever to mix this up. Like I was probably shaking it for 2-3 minutes and it still isn't all the way, but I also haven't used it in a very long time. But it's good enough. And the powder looks like this. It's very grainy. It comes in a different container. Mine broke, so now it lives in a mason jar. And I'm gonna take my palette knife and I will sacrifice this lid. So I'm just gonna take a little bit. Even that's probably way too much, but that's okay. And I like to even kind of crush it up a little more because I've noticed, and I don't know if all of them are like this, but sometimes these little grains are a little too lumpy and I want more of a smoother paste. And so now we want, let's see, I'm gonna drip a couple drops off to the side and I'll mix it with my paintbrush. So you want to use a separate paintbrush for this. You do not want to use the brushes that you've been using for with your mineral spirits because you don't want the mineral spirits to mix in with this solution. You don't want to mix with water. You want to make sure that you are only using the powder and the solution that comes with it. Otherwise it's not going to work. So I'm going to find just a spare paintbrush. I want sort of a long bristle brush, and I'm just going to mix this together until I get a nice paint-like consistency. I don't want it too runny and I don't want it too thick, but I want it, you can see how white that is. So now I can go back to this section here. Make sure that's focused. And I'm going to paint little tiny areas where I need that highlight to come back out again. Oop, that was a little too much, but that's okay. So this will just help me to fix this section because there's no more tooth in that section. I've layered it too much, but I need it to go lighter to fix my values. So I'm just putting it in the areas that need to be lighter in value. And that's it. So now I'm gonna let this dry overnight. I'm going to wash this out with just some water. And when that is dry tomorrow, I can go back over it and continue to work on that section. But see these little outlines here where I've not painted? I'll still be able to sort of see an outline of that when I go over it with pencil. So that's one of the reasons I don't really like to use it. If there's a different way to use this that maybe you know about that I'm not doing, you know, let me know if you have some better tricks on how to use it. I definitely will be glad to hear that. So anyways, I think we will call it a night. And I think we did a pretty good job so far. I'm liking where this is going. I was kind of hoping that I'd be able to finish this whole thing by like next week. I don't think that's going to be, it's going to take a lot longer than I thought it would, which typical color pencil, you know, typical. Always taking longer than I think it is going to. So anyways, I will call it a night. And thanks for joining. I hope you learned a lot. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave it in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And also, if you didn't know, I also do one-on-one coaching virtually or in person if you live in Southeast Georgia. And I also have all sorts of cool merchandise on my website, jhillfineart.com. I've got prints and blank note cards as well as some original works as well. Sometimes I'll do commissions if it's something that's pretty cool. And yeah, that's it. So, okay, I will see you all back here next week. Maybe, let me check my calendar. Next Tuesday, the 22nd of August at 7 p.m. We will continue working on this. So I will see you back next week. So have a good night. Bye.